Why, hello there, lovely ones. So we're going to look at a question that has the context of baking. So baking questions will generally have some kind of conversions in them. They'll also be wanting you to scale up or scale down recipes. And we'll start with this over here where it's got some basic conversions. It's telling us in the beginning the cupcake is for 9 people, or the recipe is. And then it's telling us that 1 ounce is worth or equal to roughly 28 grams. That gives us a clue that we're going to have to do some kind of changing of units over here from metric, which is your grams, to imperial, which is your ounces. It's also called customary measurements. This is an old recipe given in imperial measurements. Change all of the ounces to grams, rounding your answer to the nearest 10 grams. So over here we've got 4 ounces. So we're going to start doing this by doing a ratio. We know that 1 ounce is to 28 grams, which means if we've got 4 ounces, what have we done to go from 1 to 4? We've multiplied by 4, which means we're going to multiply by 4 to get to what the grams are over there. That is 112 grams. So the calculation that's actually happened is we've done 4 ounces times by 28 grams is going to give us 112 grams in total. And that's for the 4 ounces of batter. Now the 3.5 ounces over there, we're going to take our 3.5 and guess what? We're also going to multiply it by 28. And then the next one would be the 4.5. We'd take our 4.5 and we'd multiply it by, guess what? 28. And then while we're here, we might as well talk about what a teaspoon is in terms of millimeters. So 1 teaspoon is the same as 5 millimeters, because you will need to know that at some point. Then we've got tablespoons. A tablespoon is equals to 15 millimeters, so that's the same as 3 teaspoons. So if we've got 1.5 tablespoons, it's going to be the same as, well, let's times it by 15 to see how many millimeters that's going to be. And it's 22.5 millimeters. Now the important thing is that you're always writing the units afterwards. So you would, just to revise, to change from ounces to grams, you're going to multiply by the 28, and you have a calculator to do that. After you've done that, please remember that you do need to write down what the unit is over there. So the next question says a separate recipe was found for buttercream icing. Convert the metric measurements to imperial. So in this question, like it says, we've got the metric measurements over there. We're going to change them to imperial. If, for the previous question, to get from 4 ounces, we multiplied by 28 to get to 112 grams, what we're going to do for the 140 over here is we're going to take the 140 grams and divide by 28. So you see what I did there? When it's ounces and I'm changing to grams, I'm going to multiply it by 28. But when it's grams and I'm changing to ounces, I'm going to divide by 28. And that just happens to be 5 ounces exactly. And then we've got the next one over there, so it's going to be 280 grams. We're dividing by 28 because there are 28 grams in every ounce, and that will give us 10 ounces as our answer. Here's that tablespoon thing again. Just remember tablespoons. 1 tablespoon is 15 millimeters, in case you're ever asked to exchange or change between. The next question, also related to the context is changing from Fahrenheit to Celsius. And when you've got questions like this, you'll usually be given the formula. So over here, it's telling us we've got Fahrenheit. And there we go, we're changing it to Celsius. So it's what I like to call plug and play. We write down Celsius and then in brackets the temperature is 340 minus 32 and times by 5 over 9. And this comes to a temperature of 171.1 degrees. But the answer over there says to the nearest 10 degrees, so let's round it down. It's going to be 170 degrees Celsius. That's pretty important. The next question is asking us to change from degrees Celsius. Now there is also a formula that we can use here, and I'm going to write it down. So we've got Fahrenheit is equals to 9 over 5 times by the degrees Celsius plus 32. So that's going to be 9 over 5 times by 200 plus 32, which gives us an answer of 392 degrees Fahrenheit. But of course they want it to the nearest 10 degrees, so let's round it off. It's going to round down to 390 degrees Fahrenheit. So another thing you'll find coming up often with baking context questions is increasing the ingredients to certain proportions. And you've got to always look at what the original proportion is and what you can multiply it by to get to the new proportion. For example, to go from 6 to 12, I'm going to multiply by 2, which means that everything else I'm also going to multiply by 2. And that becomes 200, oh, not 200, but 450 grams. And this over here times by 2 becomes 200 grams. And of course 1 pinch of salt then becomes 2 pinches of salt. The next one, to go from 6 to 30, I'm going to multiply it by 5. And you get the idea. So then if we go and look down over here, it's the same idea again. You're going to go from 4 portions to 12 portions, so that means you're going to multiply each amount by 3. What is 6 times 3? It's going to be 18 tea bags, and 2.5 times by 3 is 7.5 tablespoons of golden caster sugar. If we look at going from 4 to 200, then we're going to be multiplying everything by 50. So that means now 6 times 50 becomes 300. So 300 tea bags. And 2 times by 50 then becomes 100 lemons. Now one of the reasons I'd like this worksheet, or these sets of worksheets to do, were these questions over here, where it gives real context to what's happening. It says you are required to prepare a finger buffet with food platters. For light snacks, allow 3 bites per person. For light meal, 6 bites, and for a full meal, 10 to 12 bites per person. Each platter holds 50 bites. Calculate the number of bites needed for 300 people for a light meal. So I'm going to highlight light meal because that's important. And over here we know light meal is 6 bites per person. So if we've got 300, in order to find out the number of bites needed, we're multiplying 300 by 6, and that gives us 1,800 bites needed to feed those number. So the next question then asks, calculate the number of platters. So we know that we've got 1,800 bites we've got to put onto platters. And we also know that each platter holds going to divide it by 50, which comes to 36 platters. So it's not difficult calculations, you've just got to read the question quite carefully. The next one says 40 of the guests will be staying on for the evening and require full meals. Calculate the minimum number of bites required in the evening. So I do find the questions a little ambiguous because yes, it says 40 of the guests, but does that mean it's 40 of the 300, which means we've got 260 people for a light meal and then the 40 for the full meal? Or is it 40 more guests? So I'm going to be honest, I'm going the easy route and I'm going to say that it's 40 more guests that are going to be joining. So in total 340 people. Its question says calculate the minimum number of bites required in the evening. Well, we've still got to add in those 40 guests who are doing the full meal, and the full meal are 10 to 12 bites per person. We're going to go with 10 because they say minimum, and that takes us to 400 bites. So that means we need, what's 1,800 plus 400 will give us 2,200 bites. Calculate the maximum number of bites required in the evening. Well, instead of doing 40 times 10, we're now going to do 40 times 12, and that takes us to 480 bites, which would then mean that instead we have 1,100, you get what I mean, plus 480 equals 2,280 bites. The difference in the number of bites required between the maximum and the minimum quantities, well, it's hopefully fairly obvious that it's going to be 80 bites. And then state whether you would prepare the minimum or the maximum number of bites and give a reason for your answer. Well, if you wanted to save money, you would go for the minimum, or if you wanted to impress, you would go for the max. So max, so that no one goes hungry, and then goes hungry, or the min to save money. So both answers could be right. As long as you can justify it and write it in a full sentence, it's all good. The quantities of cake slices shown are for 200 people. 2 slices have been allocated per person. You would like to reduce this for some smaller orders. Complete the table for the quantities shown. You must have whole cakes, and you may not go over the 2 slices per person limit. Ensure you round up or down as appropriate to allow for 2 slices per person. So I'm going to do this first with the decimals, and then we're going to change it around. And as you can see, I've done that. I've divided each one of these numbers by 200, then multiplied by the 10 people. And I've got 4.5 brownies, 3 carrot cakes, 6 cheesecakes, and 6.5 lemon drizzles. They're wanting whole numbers, so we've got to make sure that 4.5 is a whole number and 6.5 is a whole number, but at the same time, it must total 20. So between the two of these, they're going to add up to 11 to make sure that it totals 20. It doesn't actually matter which one you choose to be smaller or bigger. I'm going to choose that one to be smaller and this one bigger, just because I like lemon drizzle more. And now I know that 4 plus 3 plus 6 plus 7 is going to give me a total of 20. Where did that 20 come from? It came from the 10. 10 times 2 is 20. So as you can see, when we're looking at 25 people, we've got decimals happening as well. The 7.5, then 11.25 and 16.25 are going to all add up to give us, 35. So we've got to round accordingly. 7.5 We're going to make 8 because it's closest. Then we'll change the 11.25 to be 11 and that to be 16, and when we add them all together we're going to get 50. The same process is going to apply with the 4 people, except instead of multiplying by 10 or multiplying by 25, we're going to multiply by 4. And with the last one, we've got these numbers. I'm going to round this down to 1 and this one up to 2 and this over here down to 2 and this one to 3, and because of that, when I add them all together, I am going to get a total of 8. Well, that's actually that for now with this particular context. There is more we can do with baking, such as things like cost price and selling price and all sorts of things, and we could even go into break even, and we could talk about budgets, but that would definitely make this long video even longer. So with that, much love.